I paid for my brother's dream wedding, venue, suit, everything. Then discovered I wasn't even on the guest list. He declared, "You're too awkward, it'd ruin the vibe." So I made one call. The florist, DJ, and cake never appeared, but the silence at the ceremony did. I, 31M, should have seen the red flags months ago. When my younger brother asked for help funding his wedding, I didn't hesitate. Growing up, we'd always been close despite our 10-year age gap. I'd been more like a protective older brother than a sibling, helping him through college when our parents couldn't, lending him money for his first apartment, being his safety net whenever life got rough. The wedding was supposed to be his fairy tale moment. His fiancée came from money, but her family had cut her off after some family drama I never fully understood. So when he called me in March, voice cracking with desperation, explaining how they'd already put deposits down before her family pulled their support, I stepped up without question. $15,000 for the venue, another $3,000 for catering upgrades, $2,000 for the DJ and entertainment, $1,000 for flowers, $800 for his custom suit and groomsman attire. The cake alone cost $1,200 because she insisted on some celebrity baker. By the time May rolled around, I'd quietly funneled nearly $25,000 into making their dream wedding happen. I never asked for recognition or thanks. The joy on his face when he called to tell me everything was booked and confirmed was payment enough. He kept thanking me, saying he'd pay me back someday, promising this wedding would be perfect because of my generosity. I told him not to worry about the money. Seeing him happy was worth every cent. That's what made the email so devastating. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks before the wedding. A mass message from his fiancée's account with the subject line, "Wedding Guest List Finalization." I'd been expecting my official invitation for weeks, but figured they were handling family invites separately from the formal paper ones. I scrolled through the attached list, looking for my name among the 150 guests. I checked twice, 3 times. My name wasn't there. My stomach dropped as I called him immediately. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. I asked him directly about the guest list, trying to keep my voice steady. He was quiet for a long moment before admitting there had been some difficult decisions about the final head count. I pressed him for details, and that's when he delivered the crushing blow. He explained, somewhat awkwardly, that his fiancée and her friends had been discussing the guest list, and they decided I might not fit the vibe they were going for. According to him, I was too serious and socially awkward and might make their younger friends uncomfortable. The words hit like physical blows. Too awkward. Might ruin the vibe. This from the brother I'd supported financially and emotionally for over a decade. I asked him if he'd fought for me, if he'd stood up to his fiancée about excluding the person who'd made their wedding financially possible. His silence answered everything. He tried to rationalize it, saying I'd understand, that it wasn't personal, that we could celebrate privately afterward. He suggested I could watch the ceremony from the parking lot if I really wanted to be there. I hung up without another word. For 2 days, I sat with this betrayal, replaying every conversation, every dollar I'd transferred, every time I'd prioritized his happiness over my own financial security. I drained most of my emergency fund to pay for vendors I wouldn't even see perform. But those vendors had been booked under my name, my credit card, my contact information. That Thursday morning, I started making calls. The florist was first. I explained there had been a change of plans and I needed to cancel the Saturday wedding flowers. She was confused since it was such short notice, but when I confirmed I was the person who'd paid the deposit and provided my card information for verification, she agreed to the cancellation. The $500 cancellation fee seemed like a bargain. The DJ was more complicated. He tried to argue about the short notice, but I calmly explained that as the paying customer, I was exercising my right to cancel. He could keep the deposit. I just needed the service canceled. After 20 minutes of back and forth, he agreed. The cake baker was almost apologetic. She'd apparently dealt with family drama affecting weddings before and didn't ask many questions when I requested cancellation. She offered to donate the already completed cake to a local shelter, which I thought was fitting. The venue was the trickiest call. The booking was in my brother's name, but the payment method and guarantee were mine. I explained to the manager that due to family circumstances, I was withdrawing my financial backing from the event. I couldn't cancel their booking, but I could certainly stop payment on the outstanding balance and remove my credit card as the guarantee method. The manager was concerned because this left the venue with no way to collect final payment. She said they'd have to contact the customer directly to arrange alternative payment by Friday, or they couldn't honor the booking. I provided my brother's phone number and wished her luck. By Friday afternoon, my phone was buzzing constantly. My brother called 17 times. His fiancée called 4 times from her number and twice from numbers I didn't recognize. His best man even tried reaching me. I didn't answer any of them. Saturday morning, I went for a long hike in the mountains, keeping my phone on airplane mode. The wedding was supposed to start at 4 o'clock. I wondered if they'd managed to scramble together alternative arrangements, or if they were dealing with the reality of what happened when you bite the hand that feeds you. When I finally turned my phone back on that evening, I had 43 missed calls and 28 text messages. The messages told the story I'd expected. The venue had locked them out Friday evening when they couldn't provide payment. The florist never delivered. No music meant someone's iPhone playlist through a borrowed speaker. The cake situation had apparently caused a complete breakdown from the bride. But what I hadn't expected was the complete collapse of relationships it triggered. My brother's texts started angry, calling me petty and vindictive. But by Saturday evening, they'd shifted to desperate pleas. Apparently, the bride's family had used the wedding disaster as an excuse to completely cut contact, claiming it proved their daughter had chosen poorly. Several of her friends had posted about the disaster wedding on social media, turning it into a local gossip sensation. His best man's message was more revealing. He'd apparently tried to defend me when the bride was ranting about how I'd sabotaged their day. But my brother had doubled down, saying I was too immature to handle being excluded and that I'd proved exactly why I didn't belong at their wedding. The best man told him that was cold, especially given everything I'd done for him over the years. He'd apparently walked out of the reception early, disgusted by my brother's lack of accountability. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the wedding disaster, and the fallout has been more extensive than I anticipated. My brother showed up at my apartment last Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer the door, but something in his voice when he called through it made me reconsider. When I opened it, he looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked if we could talk, and I let him in despite my better judgment. The story he told was both satisfying and pathetic. The marriage had lasted exactly 6 days. His new wife had apparently blamed him for the wedding disaster, saying his weird, obsessive family had embarrassed her in front of everyone she cared about. She'd moved back in with a friend and was already talking to lawyers about annulment. But that wasn't the worst part. Her social media campaign about this sabotaged wedding had backfired spectacularly. Mutual friends who knew about my financial support had started asking questions. When people learned I'd paid for everything and then been excluded from the guest list, public opinion shifted dramatically. The bride's attempt to paint me as a jealous, vindictive brother fell apart when too many people knew the real story. Instead, she ended up looking spoiled and ungrateful, while my brother looked weak for not standing up for family. His employer, a small marketing firm where image matters, had apparently heard about the situation through social media connections. While they couldn't fire him for personal drama, he'd been quietly moved off client-facing projects and felt his position becoming precarious. He tried to apologize, but it felt hollow. He kept saying he never meant for things to go this far, and that he didn't realize how much the wedding meant to me. The most infuriating part was his suggestion that I should have just talked to him, instead of canceling everything. I asked him point blank, if I had called him Thursday morning and demanded to be added to the guest list, would he have fought for me then? His inability to answer told me everything. He left after an hour of circular conversation, promising to make things right, though neither of us knew what that meant anymore. Update 2. 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from my aunt, my father's sister who lives across the country. She'd apparently heard about the situation through family channels and wanted my side of the story. What I learned from her was illuminating. She'd been invited to the wedding but had declined due to travel costs. According to her, my brother had been talking about money troubles for months, complaining to various family members about how expensive the wedding was becoming. But he'd never mentioned that I was covering the costs. More interesting was her revelation that this wasn't the first time my brother had taken credit for things I'd provided. She reminded me of Christmas 3 years ago, when I'd bought my nephew an expensive gaming setup. My brother had apparently told everyone he'd saved up for months to afford it, never mentioning my contribution. She asked me a question that's been haunting me since. When did you become his secret benefactor instead of his brother? The truth was uncomfortable. Somewhere along the way, I'd started defining our relationship through financial support rather than genuine connection. I'd become his safety net, his problem solver, his invisible bank account, but not his equal. Her perspective helped me realize something crucial. Canceling the wedding vendors wasn't really about revenge. It was about finally refusing to be invisible in my own brother's life. Update 3. Last week, I received a formal letter from a law office. My brother's estranged wife was apparently attempting to sue me for intentional interference with contractual obligations related to the wedding cancellations. I called the lawyer whose name was at the bottom of the letter. After a brief conversation where I explained that I'd canceled services I'd personally contracted and paid for, she seemed less confident about their case. Apparently, my brother's ex-wife had painted a very different picture of the situation. The lawyer asked me to provide documentation of my payments, which I was happy to do. I'd kept meticulous records of every transaction, every email, every receipt. The paper trail clearly showed that I was the customer of record for virtually every wedding service. 2 days later, the lawyer called back. After reviewing the documentation, they were withdrawing from the case. Apparently, it's quite difficult to sue someone for canceling services they themselves had contracted and paid for, regardless of the intended beneficiary. But the lawsuit threat had an unexpected consequence. My brother called me that same evening, furious that I'd made him look like a liar to his ex-wife's legal team. According to him, I'd provided excessive documentation that made it obvious he'd misrepresented his role in wedding planning. I told him the truth was the truth, and documentation didn't lie. If his ex-wife had been operating under false assumptions about who paid for what, that was his problem, not mine. He accused me of trying to ruin his life, of being vindictive and cruel. He said I'd destroyed his marriage, damaged his reputation, and now I was making him look financially irresponsible to lawyers. I reminded him that I'd been willing to pay for his entire wedding while being too awkward to attend it. If his life was ruined, he'd ruined it himself by prioritizing his fiancé's social anxieties over family loyalty. The conversation ended with him saying we were done and that he never wanted to see me again. I told him that was probably for the best. That was 8 days ago. The relief I've felt since then has been surprising. For the first time in years, I'm not waiting for the next financial emergency, the next favor, the next time I'll be needed but not wanted. I've started going to therapy to understand why I'd accepted being treated as a convenient resource rather than a family member. My therapist suggested that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is stop enabling their selfishness. My brother taught me an expensive lesson about the difference between being generous and being used. $25,000 was a steep price for that education, but some lessons are worth the tuition. The wedding that never happened showed both of us exactly what our relationship had become: transactional, one-sided, and ultimately unsustainable. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices without your safety net. I don't regret the money I spent trying to make his wedding dreams come true. But I also don't regret the phone calls that ensured I wouldn't be financially supporting people who considered me too awkward for their company. The silence at his ceremony wasn't just from missing vendors. It was the sound of a relationship finally being honest about what it had always been.